me at Cello, Cello. You had me at Cello. You had me at Cello. Oh, you had me at Cello.
Hello, everybody. It's once again 5 o'clock on a Friday, and that means time for Cello Chat before our earnest weekend of practicing. With me this week is Professor Benjamin Karp. How are you doing today, Professor Karp?
I'm doing well, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing really very well, thanks. And I'm delighted to have you on. Can you give your background to the viewer? How did you get to where you are today?
Well, it depends on how far back you want me to go, but I grew up in Atlanta, Georgia, started cello in the public schools in fourth grade. I really wanted to play French horn or bassoon, but the string teacher came to my classroom first, and I did not know that she would be followed by the wind and brass teacher. So by the time they came, I had already chosen cello, so I stuck with it. In my first 7 years or 6 years, I think I probably had 7 different teachers. It was a bit of a mess. Bit of a hodgepodge. And then my junior year of high school, I finally had a really fine teacher. I don't know if you're aware of Martha Gershevsky, but Martha describes me as her first and very nearly last student. I was not an easy student to work with. I had been actually thrown out by 2 previous teachers, so it was clearly I was not the ideal student. But Martha got me in shape, and I studied with her for 2 years and then went off to college. And my path from there is a little different. I had no intention of becoming a cellist. I went to Yale as an undergraduate and continued to take lessons. Those are the years that I studied with George Nykrug. I commuted to Boston once a month and had a lesson with Mr. Nykrug. But things were not going all that well. I would not practice for the first couple of weeks and catch up on all my coursework, and then I would start to practice for my upcoming lesson, fall behind in my coursework. And so it just, this cycle of not really fulfilling either obligation continued for a while until Mr. Nykrug asked me to transfer to Boston University, where he was at the time, and become a music major there. And I did not want to do that. So I thought, now's my chance. I can quit the cello finally. So I turned him down and I quit for about 2 weeks and missed it. And at a friend's urging, auditioned for Aldo Pariso, and he accepted me. So I continued to study with him. I was very privileged in that I did not have to think of college as the time to choose a career or as a trade school. I just took courses that interested me, and I figured that a career would appear. So when I graduated, I was looking at the possibility of going back to school and getting my pre-med requirements and sort of going into the family business, as it were. My father was a professor of neurology at Emory University. But he had always loved music, and some small part of him had if not regretted, at least wondered what his life would have been like if he had stuck with music. He was a very good high school trombonist and gave it up when he went into college. So I decided that I didn't want to be a 40-year-old physician wondering if I should have been a musician. And I also needed to find out if I finally practiced, would I get better? So I had a grandfather who had passed away and left me the princely inheritance of about $2,300. And I stayed in New Haven for a year, living on that money, renting a truly disgusting apartment. and doing nothing but practicing for the year. I practiced 8 to 10 hours a day. It was really my year of being totally obsessive. I think if an outside observer could easily have had me committed that year because I just kept to myself and practiced, and that's all I did. Mr. Parsa was giving me lessons, so I got out of the apartment once a week to go to my lesson. And lo and behold, I found that with practice, one could get better. So I did that for the year and then decided that in all likelihood, being a professional musician was not staying in your grungy apartment and practicing 10 hours a day. So I decided to spend a year supporting myself in music because I had exhausted the inheritance by that point. And I became a member of what we called the I-95 Orchestra, going up and down Interstate 95, playing in every town in Connecticut. And so I did that for a year, and I enjoyed being a professional, but I didn't particularly enjoy being a freelancer, specifically because in January there was no work and I had not saved enough and I ate ramen for about 3 weeks. So at that point I thought I need really to go back to school and get a degree in music. I wanted someone who would be absolutely honest with me, brutally honest with me. And I had witnessed 4 or 5 of Mr. Starker's master classes at Yale, and he was, without a doubt, the most brutal person I had ever encountered. And so that's how I chose to audition for him. That's why I chose to audition for him. And he accepted me for the master's degree. But he was going to be on sabbatical that coming year. Mm. And he told me I could wait a year and then come to Bloomington, or I could go in the fall and study with Gary Hoffman, who I had no idea who Gary Hoffman was, but I thought it would be a good idea to go to Bloomington and get my feet on the ground. And it turned out to be the best thing I had ever done. Gary is a fabulous teacher, as great a player as he is, in my opinion, even a more talented teacher, or more natural teacher. And that year was just wonderful for me. Gary and I then became very good friends. He came to my wedding, and my bride marched out to Gary doing the six suite sarabande, which I think he may never have actually forgiven us for, but it was really beautiful. So then Mr. Starker came back. I ended up, because of a bunch of administrative errors, spending 3 years in Bloomington. When I got there, I had spent the summer in Colorado, in the Colorado Philharmonic, what is now the National Repertoire Orchestra, I think. At the time, it was in Evergreen, Colorado. And I drove into Bloomington, went to check in the School of Music, and they had no idea who I was. They had lost my application. They had no folder on me. But luckily, I had the letter from Mr. Starker, and they built my folder around that letter. However, they told me, you shouldn't have been accepted as a graduate student because you don't have an undergraduate degree in music. So you have to earn a bachelor's degree in music first. So that upset me a little bit. And I spent a semester as an undergraduate non-degree student. I was taking lessons with Gary, playing an orchestra, and doing chamber music. By the end of that semester, I thought, okay, I need to get the degree. So the next semester, I enrolled as an undergraduate, taking all the undergraduate courses that I needed in music. But at the end of that semester, they called me into the graduate office and said, there was a small mistake. You should have been a graduate student the whole time. So this rekindled my anger. And the following semester, I was a graduate non-degree student taking lessons, chamber music and orchestra. And by the end of that semester, I thought, okay, I need to just get the master's degree. So I spent 3 semesters in did the master's, and then left. After graduation, I went for my second summer as a fellow at Tanglewood. And when that summer was winding down, I had to choose where to go for the fall. And the logical choices were Boston, New York, or back to Atlanta. And I realized I would have to start at the absolute bottom in either Boston or New York. And in Atlanta, I knew some people and I could live at home. So I went back to Atlanta, lived at home for about 2 weeks, and realized that was not tenable, and got a job. I had auditioned for and gotten the job with the Atlanta Ballet, so I had a little bit of income. One of the flute players in the Atlanta Ballet told me about a Mexican restaurant where she waited tables, and the manager was a frustrated artist, so he was very kind at letting her get off shifts when she had gigs to play. So I got a job as a waiter there and spent the year, again, living in a horrific apartment, but waiting tables and taking some auditions. Without much success. I had no idea how to prepare for an orchestra audition. That was, even though Mr. Starker had been principal of the Metropolitan Opera, Dallas Symphony, Chicago Symphony, he really did not prepare people for orchestral auditions. And that wasn't why I had gone back to school in the first place. So again in the spring, the late spring of that year, a friend of mine in New York, who was a lawyer and an amateur cellist, had taken his cello to work because he was going to be reading chamber music after work, and he was riding the elevator up, and another junior attorney said, "Oh, that's a cello. That's interesting. My mother's organization in Florida is looking for a cellist. They can't seem to find anybody they like." So they exchanged my information. I got a call from what was then the new College String Quartet in Sarasota. They had been holding auditions for a number of months and were close to making a decision, but were not really committed yet. They weren't happy about it. So they gave me the opportunity to send them a tape. And I had my master's recital. I had a Shostakovich piano quintet from Tanglewood that I sent. Oh. Turned out that Shostakovich was the favorite composer of the decision maker in Sarasota. So they invited me down for an audition, and I managed to get that job and stayed in Sarasota for 6 years with the quartet. It was a great experience. We learned 6 different programs every year. We rehearsed every day for 2.5, 3 hours. I was by far the youngest member of the group, so I got some great experience and knowledge from the other members. And that's when I started teaching as well, first at a community college called then Manatee Community College. And then later, I was asked by University of South Florida to be an adjunct, taught there for a couple of years. And that job, I managed to attract enough students to make it a full-time job. They held a national search, and I got the job. My wife, who's a violinist, was principal second violin of the Florida Orchestra in Tampa. So we moved there, lived there for 1 year, and her orchestra was experiencing financial difficulties, was missing checks. It did not seem like a place to stay. So the University of Kentucky had an opening, which I applied for and was lucky enough to get. And I've been here ever since. It's now, I think, 30 years. The job at University of Kentucky included a piano trio, which had been in existence for a while, and it was great to do that repertoire. That's more what I had done at Indiana. The string quartets were relatively new for me when I went to Sarasota, so I had a steep learning curve there. And then I started to play in Cincinnati. I had a friend from my Yale days who was principal cellist of the Cincinnati Chamber Orchestra. Her stand partner bailed on the Chamber Orchestra just before the start of the season, so she asked me if I could play. And I became the associate principal, and then when she left, I became the principal of that orchestra. And at the same time, I started to sub in the Cincinnati Symphony, which was a lot of fun. They generally hired subs only for their big repertoire or for tours. And so I didn't have to do a lot of the daily grind stuff with them and got to play very, very good repertoire. And I continue to do that. And in fact, right now, I am doing it more or less full time. They had a sudden retirement before the beginning of the season and asked me to play 36 weeks of the season. I talked it down to 33 weeks, but I am commuting almost every day. So,
Wow.
I'm not sure. That's about the story, I think.
Yeah. How far is the commute?
It's an hour and a half each way. So a lot of days I do a few hours of teaching and then drive, or drive there and come back and do a few hours of teaching. So it's
wow.
4 days.
Well, now talk a bit about your teaching style. It's quite an interesting mix of teachers. How do Whitcomb, Caruso, Starker, Hoffman, how do you channel what you learned from them, as it were, when you teach?
Well, I really just try to remember the best of each and not too much of the worst of each. I try not to be. I think Mr. Starker could be a little manipulative, shall we say, and I try not to do that. But the principles that I took from, I think, all 4 of my major teachers, I try to give to my students. I was thinking about this a few years ago. Everyone I studied with was, I would say, a short person. And I am 6'6". So I have a very different body type from my teachers, and I had to adapt their principles to these extra inches of limbs and long fingers, and it's made me flexible. So I try to be flexible with my students and understand at least that we're not all the same. And I try to imagine what it feels like when they play. And what is not optimal about how they're feeling and what would be best for them to change.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Now, let's see, along those lines, since you had a while when you weren't the most motivated person to practice, but then were able to find a way to become somebody who could practice a lot every day. But also, I mean, like you say, every student is different. They all have different paths, different ways of thinking, different things that might inhibit them from finding how to flip that particular switch. What is, in a nutshell, what is your philosophy of teaching as it relates to motivating students to practice?
I'm sure you have this experience as well with college students. They have assignments in other courses. They have papers due. They have exams. They start to fall behind in cello. From my own experience, I try to convince them that even 4 minutes of smart practice can accomplish something. it doesn't yield immediate results. You're not going to see it the next time you take out your cello, but you're building a foundation, and every 4-minute increment helps. So I had an experience, it's now 10 years ago. The principal cello position in the Lexington Philharmonic opened up. I was 56. I had not taken an audition in many years, and I decided I wanted it. I had also not been particularly successful at orchestral auditions previously. So I decided if I wanted to take this audition, I had to commit to it, and I had to make sure that I didn't lose the audition. Somebody could beat me, but I was not going to lose the audition.
Interesting.
So I think my obsessive side kicked in, as it had sometimes in the past. And I made a chart. All the excerpts that were required, the concerto, the Bach, I threw in a Popper etude and my warm-up routine, and put them all on the chart. If I did each one 20 minutes a day, it came out to 6 hours. I then took those 20 minutes and divided them into 5 4-minute intervals.
Mm-hmm.
And during those 4 minutes, I would concentrate on exactly one thing. It might be pitch. It might be the shifts in an excerpt. It might be the string crossings. It might be the rhythm, phrasing, starting a particularly difficult excerpt cleanly, something like Don Juan. Doing that for 4 minutes, and only that. And then when the timer stopped, going on to the next thing. Because I am the type of person who, when I practice, want to stick with something until it gets better. And for me, it's a very fine line between the moment when it gets better and when it starts to deteriorate. So being able to stop at 4 minutes and move on, and then when the 20 minutes was over, go on to the next thing on the list. So I didn't notice daily progress. However, I did that for it's probably 7 or 8 weeks. And afterwards, I calculated that I had spent between 20 and 22 hours on each excerpt.
Wow.
And it really worked for me. I mean, I had never gone into an audition feeling that way. And I had never played that way in an audition. And I just became a better cellist.
Nice.
Doing it.
That is a great point. Among the things that can become a roadblock for a student in getting themselves to practice as much as they either want to or feel that they ought to, they can allow themselves to get overwhelmed, to feel overwhelmed, and so that I'm responsible for one component of this for these 4 minutes. It's something that I'm sure some people out there are going to try even this weekend.
Yeah.
Now you have successfully recorded a lot and on a lot of labels. How would you compare what's kind of the ideal skill set in the recording studio versus when preparing for orchestral auditions?
I think actually orchestral auditions and recording are very similar. You want to get it in one take. I always found my best on my third try. So getting yourself to sound your best, to play your third time, your first time, that's the object. I I think about Mr. Starker, and recording engineers must have just loved him. I think they probably called him one take Starker. You know, he could just sit down in front of a microphone and play everything. I remember my first recording session as a member of the section in Cincinnati, with the 27 microphones set up on stage and all the crew around, and I was just praying that I didn't screw up, And that's no way to play. That's virtually guaranteeing that you will be the one who screws up. Yeah. And that was also, part of the practicing for the audition, part of the 4 minutes of getting your head in the right place. I was always the kind of person who, when I got nervous, my mind went off in 1,000 directions. Having a set of thoughts that you go through before you begin something. So for each of those excerpts in the orchestral audition, I had 3 thoughts. Very simple. One technical, maybe one either rhythmic or intonation moment that I wanted to keep in mind. And then the final thought was the musical one. What am I trying to say? What am I trying to do with this phrase? And then go. And you do that several thousand times, and it becomes natural, becomes automatic, and it just helps drown out all the chatter that we are all subject to.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, it's that chatter that can be so paralyzing and distracting.
Yeah.
And it's it reminds me of the way sometimes people talk about trying to simplify a golf putt or something, where in the end, I mean, of course, we have all these fundamentals that we have to have developed, but then you need to get to a point where you trust that those are there, and you pick your objective, and that's what your focus is on.
I don't go so far as to call myself a golfer. I own clubs and I play. Do you golf?
Well, I own clubs too.
Okay. So have you read, I think it's Bob Rotella's book, Golf is a Game of Confidence?
Yes. There was a while when the inner game of tennis was popular.
Yeah.
But I find that is also a very wonderful different way of thinking about a lot of the same things that we're trying to do.
Right. I think if you got rid of the word club and golf and just substituted cello and music, it would read as a great mental preparation book. And I use that all the time. It doesn't matter if the putt is for your entire career or just in practice. The process is the same. And it's just one of 1,000, one of 10,000 that you do, and you just execute. So that is a definite principle that I try to impart to my students.
Tremendous.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing that kind of comes to mind, I always like to, particularly, even if I've seen or heard some of the various people I'm going to interview, just look around and see what else is online. We all have at least a few videos of ourselves playing, and you have an interesting collection of photographs and some videos that I think also show a level of, I'd say, accessibility that is also maybe contrasting to Starker's persona. Mm-hmm. Is that by design?
Yes, I think it is. At Indiana, Mr. Starker's studio door was right next to Mr. Gingold's. Mm-hmm. And I always felt going through Mr. Gingold's door to play chamber music for him, I instantly became a better musician, a better cellist. Going into Mr. Starker's door, I immediately lost some percentage of my abilities and my confidence. Now that might not be the case for everyone. It was certainly the case for me. And I think as a teacher, you make a choice. What kind of teacher do you want to be? I would rather be the one that students feel warmth and confidence coming into the room. I hope I have achieved that, but I keep working at it.
I love that. I love that. Well, so now what are some of the, I mean, given the context of the Cincinnati Symphony, so what are some of your other either upcoming performances or projects that you're looking forward to in the remainder of 2022 or in 2023?
I tell you, it's just trying to keep my head above water. I'm having to learn so much new music for Cincinnati, and it's wonderful. You know, I wasn't sure at my age if I could do this. We had a performance last weekend of Panufnik Symphonia Sacra, Ralph Vaughan Williams Symphony No. 6. Have you ever played that?
I haven't.
Unbelievable. Just like a roller coaster, and there's no seatbelt and you're just hanging on. So, you know, that has been wonderful. In the Lexington Philharmonic, we have a new music director, Melise Brunet. I was on the search committee for that position, which stretched out over 4 years because of COVID. So I am trying to do as much as I can in the Lexington Philharmonic to, to welcome her and get to know her. So we had our opening concert 2 weeks ago.
All right.
Which was a lot of fun. Again, a very difficult program, Copland Third Symphony. And a piece by Gabriella Lena Frank with rhythms and effects I had never seen before. So, you know, I love that I am continuing to learn new stuff and be exposed to new stuff. I feel like a little bit my career is the opposite of how it should be, given my age. But it's wonderful. So I'm having a blast.
That's so important.
Yeah.
Sorry, were you about to say something else?
No. I was just saying a lot of projects have been put on hold for a while. I continue to teach at the Brevard Music Center, which was really essential in my own development. It's where I first met my people. I went there the summers after 8th, 9th, and 10th grades. And I have a very good circle of friends there. We play chamber music. We teach. We spend a little time on the porch drinking wine in the evenings, and it's a wonderful summer. So I'm looking forward to heading back to the mountains of North Carolina once this year is over. Yeah.
All right. Well, best of luck juggling everything.
Thank you.
Like a very full plate.
Thank you very much.
And thanks so much for your time. This has been a lot of fun, Benjamin.
Well, it's my pleasure, and thank you for asking me.
Excellent. And to all you out there, happy practicing all weekend and the rest of the week. And we'll see you next Friday at 5. Take care.